We are going to look at 3 different endgames examples up here. So we can see that that pawn in a4 is ready to get all the way to a8 and promote. Now, we always say that we apply control the middle, development, and king safety rules for the opening. We apply control the middle, king safety, and attacking rules for the middle game. But for the end game, we really need to promote our pawns. We need to really see where are the pawns, how far those pawns are advanced, and we always want to activate our kings. The king is the most important piece for the endgame, so you want to get your king as close as possible to the promotion. Sometimes it's impossible, and then we always check how far your pawn can be promoted. In a situation like that, I always suggest that yes, you always want to get your king in front of the pawn, but sometimes we cannot, so you always want to check. Maybe you can get your pawn in. So if you move your pawn up to e5, king e6, now we see that the pawn a5 cannot be catched by the king because the king is not within the square here. So we push to a6, king d7, and after a7, king c7, king can't stop that pawn, and we're just gonna promote the queen here. Now, what was so special about this example? That we are just calculating how far we can advance our pawn and see if the king can stop that pawn or not. The next example here is very important rule to follow. We always want to put our king in front of the other king and make it an opposition. In this position, it really depends whose turn is it, and like if it's black to move, they actually could make a draw by moving king to d5 or king to e5. And if it's white to move, white can find only one winning move, which is king to d4, and then it's going to be like winning position. King to d4, it's an opposition, so we are always kind of trying to get into the opposition to push the other king away and then promote. So for example, king moves to d4, it forces the king on d6 away. Let's say it moves to c5, then white will push king d5, king d7. Another move, we are looking for the opposition. So we're not going to advance our pawn to d4 because you need to keep your pawn kind of like backward, so you can advance it later when you need another move, but you should get your king to d5. That would force the black king away from the opposition, as well as it will give us another square to get to. Ideally, we want to get our white king to e7 or to c7, because that's the squares we can control the d8 promotion square. Opposition is very, very important, so we could get more space and we can push that king on d7 away to e7 or to c7. Let's say if it's king to e7, then we get to c6, and if it's e6, we're just simply going to push the pawn. Again, the other rule to follow is like whenever you get into the opposition, it's a pawn move. So like it's 99%, like whenever you get to the opposition just like that, you're going to push your pawn and then you can just simply secure the promotion. Again, after king e7, I would suggest to move d5 right now, because if you would move king c7, king will advance back to e6 and we're just going to repeat the moves back and forth. So this is more like an exception move, d5, and after king would get to e8, we would get e7, and then we simply again secure d8 and just promote in a couple of moves. Now if king would get to d8, please do not rush with pushing your pawn all the way to d6, because after pushing d6, now the king and the pawn is on the same level, and the best move for black is not to run away to e8, because then still king c7 and white could always win. Could always try to win, but if black or like the side who has less pieces knows how to defend, it will be quite hard. But if the king moves to c8, now then pawn to d7, we check the king, and after king d8, king d6, it's a stalemate. So what was so important about this position? We're still looking for the opposition until the end of the game. We are trying to get the opposition. And you, whenever you are trying to win, or whenever you're trying to fix a draw, like to fix a stalemate, you want to be the last ones to enter the opposition. For example, in this position, king would move to g6, and again, that's an opposition. By the way, this is not the opposition diagonal. We do not count as opposition. It's only opposition like this way. So king b8, king g6, or king is on f8. That's another opposition. So king to g6, king has to move away like for example, c8, then we just advance right away to e7. So c7, d6. Again, we can see that that's an opposition, so it's time for us to get this pawn all the way to d6 here and advance the pawn forward here. So all the way back, we can always see that it really depends which move you make. So the only winning move in this position is king to d4, where we will get this opposition, because again, if you're gonna push d4, I know right away that that would be a draw, a stalemate in the end, because if black plays the right way, if black is not running to this side or to the other side, but simply blocking this pawn with king d5, and now always moving under the pawn, it's gonna be a stalemate in the end. Now the final example up here, we can see that the king is on e6, pawn is on g5, and it might look like it's a draw because this is equal, but not every equal endgame will end in a draw, as we know. So it's all about the king activity. So one of the most important rules is, again, how far is advanced your pawn and how far is advanced your king and how active is your king. So do not try to keep your king somewhere a1 or h1. Always try to get your king as further as possible. For example, in this position, just bringing the king to f7 wins the game in 4 moves from now, because it's kind of a Zugzwang position. Zugzwang is the position where one of the sides is out of the good moves and every single move is losing. So if you would simply move to f6, that would end in a draw, because after king to g8, let's say we move back f5, king f7, eventually we're gonna just break points and that would be a draw. But king f7 is so special because it's limiting the black king on h8. It's controlling the g8, g7 squares right now, and black has no good response to that. The only response here, like the only 2 moves, is h6 or h5, but both of those moves are losing. The only thing, again, we need to remember, let's say black moves to h6, do not be greedy and do not capture that pawn on h6. It's not the best solution here because it will end in a draw. Again, if you take on h6, king is coming to h7 and getting this pawn up here. So the best response to h6 is definitely to push g6. And yes, that's not a stalemate because there's still one pawn on the board, which is pawn on h6. So yes, king is out of the moves. It can move g8, g7 or h7, but the pawn can still be advanced to h7. But after g7, king h7, here we get a checkmate on g6. It's the same thing if black will decide, let's say, to h5. Please do not go for en passant. That's not best because again it's going to be a draw. As I know, yes, we are up a pawn, but this pawn can be easily captured by moving king to h7 and then king to h6. But after h5, it's just so important to advance your pawn g6 because again we're going to checkmate just in a few moves. After h4, it's the same ending like before here, g8 check. After king h6, king queen g6 will be a checkmate. So again, the most important rule for the endgame, check how far is your pawn advanced, and if it's advanced so far that like you can promote, just promote it. I always say if it's advanced so far, just promote it. And if your pawn is not enough advanced or if there's some trouble, always look for your king. Advance your king to the center, control the central squares. It's way better than keeping your king on one of the sides.